morning we are at Strathisla, the home of Chivas. It looks like they're about to start a tour. What a nice double pagoda roof they have, look. Oh, that's pretty. Right now, we're checked in, got a few minutes, let's have a look around the shop. Of course, we're at the home of Chivas, so there's going to be a lot of Chivas. Ooh. Expensive ones too. No, more expensive one. If you can see it. Ah, look. This is interesting. Look at all the things we can try. It's great that you can try all the different components. Altavania. Oh god, talkers. Oh, I think this one, we've seen it in the duty free, maybe. One of these. No, I don't think I've ever seen an official Strathisla bottle. Fantastic. Ooh, what have we got here? Have we seen it all? Just about. Hang on, it's a Tomors. Okay, pick one now.
We have an entire cask. Okay. I haven't tested that theory
Drinking
yet.
very seriously
Maybe-
over Strathisla.
Maybe today's the
We
day.
need our safety gear to go drinking.
So,
We're here with Andy and Michaela, joining us on the tasting.
we're going to head into warehouse
Karis.
number 1. So warehouse number 1 is a racked warehouse. So everything in there is stacked 7 high.
Black warehouse.
It is a duty-free warehouse, so duty-free means that nothing in there has any tax paid on it. And the reason for that is that we don't know how much whiskey we're actually going to get out of those casks
Sure.
when it comes time to bottle it. We don't know.
You're looking very good, Deepa. And so, and just Strathisla in this warehouse, or do you also warehouse
So we've got-
all the other stuff?
All the other 13 working distilleries, they'll have casks in here as well.
Okay. Is this the main maturation warehouses for different distilleries, or
We've
your?
got well over 300 different warehouses.
Yeah. So this is mostly Strathisla, but you just have some of the others?
Yeah, so
Oh, it
every
smells so good.
distillery will have their own warehouses on site. So we've got 3 here. Glenlivet have 7 or 8 now, for
Yeah,
example.
okay.
And they'll just chop and change. So in a rack warehouse, we can hold about 3,700 casks in here, but there's only
Wow.
about 1,500 at the moment.
Right.
So you're running out of stock, or?
Someone's drinking all the whiskey.
Wow.
We just don't have much in here, so
Yeah.
we have to have a lot moved. We needed to make more space in these warehouses.
I see mostly still sherry casks.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
sherry
so
in here.
most of the casks in here are puncheons or sherry butts. We have got a couple of hogsheads and bourbon barrels, so the vast majority are all sherry butts.
And the age range of what's in this warehouse, any ideas?
Age range, honestly, no. They are all completely different. So
Yeah.
we've not been in this warehouse for very long at all,
Okay.
so don't have all the information on it. But it's my understanding that there's nothing expected to be hugely old in here.
Yeah.
So they'll go down to Kilmaled, around that kind of area, around Glasgow, so that they
Yeah.
can be checked on daily by the master blenders.
Wow.
So we'll have just anything kind of mass produced here, so they're probably around 12 to 20 years old in here.
And you store casks for the whole company here, I see.
Yes.
Regal and
Yeah.
Longbourn.
Right.
Yeah. So that's all to do with fire. So if for any reason my distillery caught fire and then my warehouse caught fire, I've not only lost the distillery, but I've lost every single cask that I had.
Yeah.
A lot of emphasis. Well, this one's like quite clearly a little bit older.
Yeah.
So some of them do look a bit rough
Yeah.
around the edges.
All the best ones.
Yeah. So you'll see it's pretty much empty. So there's really not much.
Yeah,
in
there's a lot of
here.
space.
So because the majority of casks in here are sherry butts, it brings the capacity down a little bit.
Right.
Because the casks are far bigger.
So these look like pretty fresh casks. So where would these be coming from?
This and
Do you have like your standard suppliers who are always providing the sherry? Oh, this is Abelard.
yeah, this is either brand new.
You see a little. That's it.
So I think this is a Scottish oak. It's an Abelard Scottish oak. So it's a brand new cask. That one.
Right. So when you say Scottish oak, do you really mean oak from Scotland?
I do, yeah.
Oh,
Very, very rare that we use it.
I was going to say, yeah, because it's not something I've
Awful for
heard of.
building casks out of.
Is it?
Yeah, so we shy away from using virgin casks quite a lot.
Oh, and that might be virgin cask. That's what you're saying.
It will be, yeah. Usually when we use Scottish oak, it is a virgin cask.
Makes
but it's
sense.
usually to finish whiskey rather than mature it.
Okay.
So the reason that we like to use seasoned casks more than virgin oak is because of something called tannins in the wood.
Sure.
So oak has a lot of tannins and
Yeah.
vanillins in it, but the tannins make the whiskey really bitter.
Yeah.
They make it taste a bit acidic. So
Yeah.
that's why we prefer to use like bourbon and sherry casks.
Sure.
But this one will be a virgin cask built for us. We'll finish whiskey in there for 1 to 3 years.
From the Speyside Cooperage, would they be making these
Yes.
these fresh barrels?
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea. It really does look new. For good reason. Yeah, because I was wondering, I presumed the Speyside Cooperage was always just refurbishing and making hogsheads and things like that. But
Yeah,
now we know.
our own kind of like each distillery, if they have filling stations, will usually have what we call a cooper's table.
Yeah.
So they can do like really minor repairs on the
Right.
casks, but they mainly do checks to see if the casks are acceptable for us to use. So they
Got it.
literally they
Like
come on
pressure
like a,
testing and.
yeah, they come on a conveyor belt. It's not even as complicated as pressure testing. They come on a conveyor belt and they hit them with a hammer.
Yeah.
So then that's it.
But it's a very skilled hammer hit, I'm sure.
It is. They're paid probably more than I am.
Yeah.
So these are your slightly older Strathislas. So you'll see
Yeah.
they're starting to get more kind of painted.
Yeah.
So the reason that we used to paint these casks was to identify which distillery it was and which fill it was.
Right. Some good warping.
So for Strathisla, for example, blue meant first fill.
Okay.
For Capardonic, a blue cap meant second fill. So it's different for each one, but that was what
Right.
we used to identify.
Oh yeah, I see. See some
They're
blue
not
ones up there.
quite as romantic now. They've all got barcodes on them.
Yeah.
So you just scan a barcode and away it goes.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. All of these casks will obviously be used for different things. So for Strathisla, usually if it is over, if it's like a third or a fourth fill, then it will go into blends.
Right.
But we even have casks in here from distilleries that we don't own, so they will be destined to go into blends. So like this one, for example, this is a Glenlossie.
Oh.
Go into blends.
Yes, you're distillery, yeah. I've seen
It's got some good mould. So it's a Glenlossie, so it's not one of their distilleries. No. But it'll go into the blend. Yeah, it's like a little village. Apparently we have a new tasting room. Ah.
Fancy.
Let's get a little picture.
So what was it before? Office or?
So originally it was an office. So this room's actually supposed to be one room. Strathisla is of course the first oldest working distillery in the area. We're the third oldest distillery in Scotland, established in 1786, so we're over 230 years old. The distillery was built by two gentlemen called George and Alexander. And George and Alexander ran the distillery for about 40 years before it was sold to a gentleman called William Longmore. William did loads and loads for the distillery and for the community around, so everyone loved him. And unfortunately, William had to pass away as well, and the distillery was passed down to his son-in-law, and his son-in-law created William Longmore and Co. as a company. Now, with every distillery there comes times where they go through hardships and they have to face quite difficult situations, and so Strathisla had a fair few of those. So the distillery eventually fell into bad hands. So a gentleman called J. Pomeroy bought shares in William Longmore and Co. And he kept buying more and more and more, and eventually he bought the vast majority of the shares for the distillery. But Jay wasn't a great guy, he was a crook. So he didn't pay any tax on our whiskey, he sold it on the black market, and eventually he was caught. So Jay went to prison, and that meant that the distillery was now bankrupt. So
When was that?
that was 1949.
1949.
Yes.
Not so far.
Nope. But relatively
Okay.
recently. So
Yeah.
Jay went to prison in 1949, and then in 1950, the distillery were basically faced with an ultimatum. They basically were told, you can put the distillery up for auction, and you can sell it, or you can close down for good.
Right.
So the distillery was put up for auction, and it was bought by Seagrams, who owned Chivas Brothers at the time,
Okay.
for £71,000, which isn't that much now, but back then it was a good
I
amount.
bet.
So in 1950 it became the first distillery that the Chivas Brothers Company ever added into their portfolio, and since then has been the core and the heart of every single Chivas blend. But people only know Strathisla for Chivas now, so we really want people to learn about how special Strathisla is by itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we've got 4 Strathisla whiskies for you to try today. What we have are 4 of the Distillery Reserve collection bottles. So these are single cask edition, cask strength bottles, which means they are all very, very limited and very, very strong. So this first whiskey that you are trying is 62.6% alcohol. So
It's going to be this one.
it's got a bite to it.
I know you're probably not allowed to drink, but I always bring something to share back so you can pour yourself something. So we live in California, so we bring a bourbon. So it's a cask strength Old Forester, which is less normal here. So find yourself a bottle
That's a nice idea.
You distracted me completely from
Oh,
the
good.
taste.
I keep a drop of water.
a drop. I'm going to put more than a drop.
So,
Nice one.
So we are second fill. Oh, it says butt.
yeah, so this one's quite deceiving. So this is the second time we have put our whiskey into this cask. We can use casks up to 4 or 5 times, but it's very, very rare that you will see Strathisla sell 3rd and 4th fills in the shop.
Yeah.
They are destined to go into blends. So this is one of the few second fills that we have. So because this is a second fill, it makes it a really, really good middle ground. So if you're anything like me, I am really, really big on my sherried whiskies. I love the kind of warming spice that you get from them and how kind of cozy they are to drink. But I do also really like to travel around distilleries, and I like to know what the character of that individual distillery is like without that kind of sherried punch. So for me, the 16 is the perfect middleman between having that sherry fruitiness and all that kind of spice there, and also seeing the original character from each distillery. So with it being a single cask, it is a very limited bottle, so all of these are limited and rare. So there were only 828 of this bottle ever made. So it is one of the oldest releases as well, so this is a 2019 bottle. So it is currently malt of the month as well, so it is 20% off, down from £90 to £72. Now, in terms of tasting notes, we do get a list of tasting notes that we see from the master blenders, but flat out, I don't remember them because I don't use them. Because tasting notes are completely different for everyone. So are you guys getting any specific notes from this whiskey before I
I mean, it's certainly not sherry bomb territory. It says butt, but it's I don't know how long it was used the first time. A long time, I presume, because the colour is relatively light as well. So any notes?
Orange zest and heather notes.
Orange, yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of contrast.
Like cut stems?
I really like it, yeah. Prefer the refill ones, so the colour is nice at the first fills, but it's very intense in woods, and so
she said.
you get a more balanced whiskey. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Really nice.
We're still getting a little bit of the spice at the end, presumably from the European oak. Like it does come up in the same way, but
it's
without
really subtle.
without all the sherry flavours.
The proportion of sherry to experiment.
It's just a refill, it's second fill. So it's a sherry butt.
Oh, but it's got the embrace of experiment.
I'm just guessing the first time it was used, it might have been used for 30 years. Because there's very little, from the colour.
So it's like a
Very creamy.
Yeah.
Pretty much all of Strathisla whiskies are pretty sweet and very fruity. And then on the palate, we're echoing the nose and how sweet this whiskey actually is, but we're seeing some of that Strathisla fruit starting to shine through. So we're getting kind of rich red apples, a little bit of kind of pear, but not much at all here. So we're getting pears in syrup. And we're also starting to see a marzipan kind of sweetness to it. So we're getting that almond flavour, almost like icing sugar sweetness as well. There is a very, very subtle spice towards the end, so what
really
we're
nice,
seeing
that
is it's kind of like a star anise spice, so it's quite sweet and it's not aggressive. And then towards the very, very finish, there's a little grassy tasting note, so we're starting to get almost dried grass with a quite kind of floral note towards the end, so we're getting heather. So it's a range of some different really, really nice notes in this whiskey. I must admit, it's one of my favourite out of the shop. It's quite underappreciated,
It's
to be
quite
honest.
like it's quite dry. I mean, I would have guessed it was an old bourbon refill, except for the heat which comes in later. But it's quite like astringent, dry kind of green herbs for me, less sweet. It's really nice.
Yeah. People kind of assume that the reason we use a second fill is just recycling. But it's not. The reason we do that is we're not just recycling that cask, we're creating a whole new whiskey.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah.
One of our favourite things is a old tired cask that sat for 20 to 30 years somewhere in Scotland. And you just get all those little delicate things. You don't get the big obvious flavour.
Practically and realistically, it's completely different because you start to see more chemicals coming out from the wood. So you get less of that kind of sherry influence, and you start to see more of the vanillins that come through, and it makes this whiskey much more kind of creamy, and it does give it that more kind of vanilla and caramel note to it, as opposed to your sherry, which is really, really strong, dark, Christmassy fruits. Yeah. So it is just creating a whole new whiskey. This one. That's one of the things I find, honestly, a lot of people. Usually people with a lot of money will sit and they'll tell you every day of the week, 40, 50-year-old, those are the best whiskies on the market. And see when you get to about 25 up to 30 years old, that's when your whiskey starts to taste like cake. Yeah. That's when it starts to taste like you get really, really creamy sponge cake kind of tasting notes. That's when it's at its peak. Yeah. But usually I find that older than that, it's a bit mid.
Crossing over.
Like, for example, last year I got the opportunity to taste a 48-year-old Macallan from a port cask. It was one of the most vile whiskies I've ever tried in my life. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have tried some absolutely beautiful older whiskies. Like, I've tried a 38-year-old Bunnahabhain, and that was incredible. That was one of the best whiskies. I'll always be dreaming of that whiskey. Yeah. But they're just... It's hit and miss. It is hit and miss, but the vast majority I've tried that are around the 45 to 50-year-old mark. It's just like old bark.
Must be an exception.
Get that opportunity to be mellowed out by mixing it with other casks. So we'll move on to your second whiskey. So the second whiskey is going to be the Strathisla 19. So I'll let you guys pass that one around. Now the 19 used to be. I used to have the best joke for this whiskey. So whenever I did this tasting, when it first got released last year, I used to tell people this was the second smoothest 19-year-old in the building, and then I'd wink at them, but the bottle didn't age like this.
First fill, but ex-bourbon this time? Or?
Yeah, so but always means sherry.
Yeah.
And bourbon, barrel always means bourbon.
Barrel is ex-bourbon. That will mean ex-bourbon. If it's buttered, it will mean sherry. Is it always Oloroso if it's the butt, or it could be?
Usually, yes. So for Chivas, we usually specify if it's anything other than Oloroso. We will specify that because it's a selling point for us. Yeah. It doesn't really make much of a difference now to us that Oloroso is the most popular because we actually make our own sherry casks.
Right. So you're really making them to order for your...
Pretty much, yeah. So we were struggling with our sherry butts. We've been struggling with them for years now because of the sherry decline. Yeah. So we were really, really struggling to get these casks across and get enough for a reasonable price. So these casks used to cost us about £1,500 per butt, and they by this point had gone up to about £2,500 to £3,000 per cask.
And then couldn't even get hold enough, or was the supply still there?
But the problem wasn't just that they were expensive and they were rare. It was that we were finding quite drastic inconsistencies within these casks. You know, because you can Oloroso you'll find everywhere from a range of different companies, and so each one is going to give you different characteristics for each whiskey from company to company. It's the difference between a nice Malbec and a cheap Malbec. So what we do now is we buy a tanker of Oloroso sherry from Spain, and we have the casks built for us as virgin oak casks in the Cooperage.
Oh right,
in Spain?
No, they're built here.
They're built here? And you fill it with sherry here?
Yes, so they're conditioned for 13 to 15 months before we use them. So we use American sherry casks. Sometimes you can tell the difference between them. So when you get your cask...
I was going to ask, when you're making the barrel here, what oak are you choosing to put your sherry into?
It'll usually be European, so we'll try and keep it.
Yeah, okay, so the flavour profile
Similar.
is the same. It's not like you're using Scottish oak or American oak at that point.
We would avoid using Scottish oak as much as we possibly could, because it is a pain in the arse to mature with. It's the maturation
But you're
process
taking
becomes-
European oak and putting sherry in the European oak.
Yeah, we're gonna try. We're keeping it as consistent as we can with how they were before. If we change the wood entirely, you'd be as well bringing out a whole new kind of sherry release. It just wouldn't really work. So we keep it as it was. The only difference is we're just putting the spirit in cask ourselves to keep it consistent. But it's experimental mostly at the moment. It's a very, very, very new thing. It's only started this year.
Okay.
So all of the sherry that we'll have released in the next 3-4 years.
So it's not for use for production now, so it's for the future.
What about American oak sherry? Do you do any of that?
We don't build them ourselves, but we do take them. So you can always tell the difference between the two. So they have different amounts of bands. So every cask will have bands around the middle and around the end of the cask. So if my cask is a sherry gut, if there are 5 bands on each side, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's European.
Oh.
If there's only 3 bands, 1, 2, 3, it's American.
American oak.
Yeah.
Oh. And where are they typically made? The American oak sherry barrel, are they made anywhere?
In America.
It's not like you're buying American oak
Not really.
and doing it here.
Not really. If we're gonna go for American sherry, we're doing it on purpose to give us a quite kind of specific characteristic in the whiskey. So they'll just come from America the same way they would.
I haven't got a good understanding of all of that because I hear about sherry hogsheads and so it's like you can manufacture anything at this point.
I mean, a sherry hogshead, it's not a custom. It's not like a built cask from scratch. A hogshead is essentially you are taking just your average sherry cask and you're cutting it down to size.
Right. Oh, it's getting cut down.
Yes. So
I see.
It's not built. It's edited.
Yes.
So.
Didn't realise that. Yeah. It's not so clear that sherry comes from Europe and bourbon comes from America. Everything seems to be mixed. American oak can be sherry and. It's incredibly rare we'll actually use American casks for sherry whiskies. Yeah. Okay. So it's still a real one.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I can pretend it doesn't happen.
Basically, yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what I do. To be honest, if it's gonna be an American sherry, the bottles will usually tell you.
Yeah.
So the whole industry is pretty standard in like if it's anything that kind of weaves from the norm, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Because it's a selling point. It is all about finding a way to sell the exact same product with just slight differences better than everyone else. So we would tell you. But you're 19. What are we thinking of this one so far?
Deep was saying you thought it might have been even the other way around.
I'm very shocked. I mean, I thought it's bourbon. I think it's sherry. And I prefer the first one. So, but even though I'm not a sherry percentage.
Even though it's not obvious sherry, it still just fills out a little bit more depth. I could maybe convince myself it's going slightly more coconut, the second one.
I mean, coconut is one of the tasting notes that we have. So, these have all pretty much hit the nail on the head. The 19 is
it's a little more coconut.
A very kind of refreshing whiskey. So in it we do see some tropical fruits on the nose. For me personally, this is much, much more subtle than the 16 is on the nose. The 16's got that little bit of a punch. The 19 is smooth, it's easy going. This is a picnic whiskey. I've got a little bit of a connection to the 19. Obviously, this was my first year working here last year. I was 19. It was my first whiskey distillery. And I'd never worked in. I'd come fresh from a cocktail bar and a whiskey bar. So working here, and then the 19 was released. So I had like 50 bottles at home, and I'm like, what am I going to do with them?
So do you have bottles in the bedroom yet? That's like the mark of where it's starting to get out of control. Yes.
Well, see, the thing is, I've just moved into a new house, and I don't have.
That's like a house.
I don't have anything in the living room yet. I've literally got sofas and curtains and set, so I've no furniture. So I'm going to put the bottles. So they are all in my room. They're like along the wall because I've not enough furniture to put them on.
Perfect.
So when we sell these whiskies, we have two different types of hogsheads. So you have something called a dumpy and something called a traditional.
Yeah.
So your dumpy is made out of bourbon. So it's a bourbon cask turned into a hogshead. So when you're making your bourbon cask into a hogshead, you're bringing it up from holding 190 litres up to 250 by adding staves in. And that's why they look a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So you're then going to have your traditional. Now traditional was the original hogshead. They were made out of sherry. So they are basically, the ends are cut off and they have new ends put on and a couple of staves taken out.
Right.
And you're bringing the size down from 500 litres to 250. Honestly, we don't know why hogsheads were created.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, why would you go to the work to reduce the barrel?
We know
maturing faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
it can be, yes, but it's relative to the size of the cask. So it's technically in a bourbon barrel versus a sherry butt, the whiskey isn't going to mature faster than the other because it's relative to the amount of spirit that you have put in the cask. So either way, with the amount of spirit in the cask versus the bourbon barrel, they are much and such the same. But when you get down to things like quarter casks, they're going to mature drastically quicker. But the main theory for your hogshead, we know now why we continue to create them. It is because the surface area of the cask is different for the alcohol to interact with.
Yeah.
So it does change the flavour of the whiskey. On top of that, with a hogshead, you can chop and change with the staves that you add in.
Yeah,
So the vast majority of it could be from a first fill, and you could throw in a couple of second fill staves in there as well.
Yeah. So it's more like standardising the pattern so that you can mix and build.
Pretty much. But on top of that, the main reason, there are a couple of theories as to why a hogshead was originally created. So the main theory is that they were easier to move. So during times when everything was stored in a cask, they predate whiskey essentially. So flour, potatoes, everything like that. The theory was that a bourbon barrel being 190, it's too short, it's too small for somebody to move, it hurts your back. But a sherry butt, they're huge, 500 litres, you need a team of 3 people to roll one of those on their end. So the theory was that by making either a sherry butt smaller or a bourbon barrel bigger, it didn't hurt your back, but you didn't need a team of people to move it. But it is just a theory. It's the strongest theory that they have at the moment. But
It's as good as any at this point.
Yeah, we genuinely don't know. I mean, I could have just told you some random stuff made up off the top of my head there, but
But this one is European oak.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is definitely a cut down.
Yes. On top of that, you can tell from the palate, from the taste of this whiskey.
Because it is spicy.
Yeah, you can taste that little bit of sherry influence in here.
Yeah.
You got that information.
Is it an American
from
term?
Hogshead? No. So the reason they're actually called hogshead is an Old English phrase. So it was spelt different. It was hogshead. So it was spelt Oggeshed as opposed to hogshead. And it was an imperial measurement for 250 to 255 litres.
Good to know.
Yeah, okay.
So we just
About
kind
the
of
quantity.
abbreviated it because
That makes sense.
can't change it to hogshead.
Yeah,
Voila.
that makes sense.
So there were absolutely no pigs anywhere near these guys. I used notes from this. Quick thinking.
Any tasting
I've
notes?
got some leather notes in it.
Leather, yeah.
Dark honey.
Yeah.
Certainly more obviously cherry than the first one.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go back now.
Like blackberry marmalade. Not just blackcurrant, it's blackberry. For me, it's a dark fruits. And bit of menthol. This is menthol. So it's
menthol, like
menthol,
mint.
yeah,
Mint,
Yeah, right.
but not the mint note, just the
like the
the
herbal.
oil note,
Yeah.
mint. Yeah. It's a really nice one. It's a very complex one.
It's
Dark chocolate.
But I think
my,
it doesn't go well with water because maybe that's too woody for me.
yeah, I think
It has woody side to it as well, doesn't it?
It's good. It's
I
not over.
Yeah.
Not over.
Yeah.
No.
For me, I like the
the
woody side to this one. It's,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's not at that point now where it feels like you're chewing on a piece of bark.
Yeah.
So it is that kind of really nice subtlety to it. But it is one of those things I don't find that this one needs a drop of water in it.
Spicy. Yeah.
You do find that people will add water. So when you're adding your water, you're not just
Yeah.
diluting the whiskey. You are obviously causing the exothermic reaction within the glass, and that's releasing oils.
Right.
So within those oils, you have something called esters. Your esters are naturally made during fermentation. They're flavourful and fragrant particles. They're where the fruity notes basically come from for all your whiskies. So when you release those esters, you're changing the flavour of the whiskey. So for me, I find that neat, the esters where they're at are just fine. Your master blenders do add a lot of water, definitely not 50% ever. So the master blenders pretty much are unanimous on that you should never have a whiskey that's more than 25% water.
Strangely, Lefroy cask strength literally says that on the label.
You should never have...
To put 50% water in it. It's like,
Pardon?
yeah, it's
Why?
yeah. Well, that's our question.
Because it's an awful whiskey as it is.
No.
It's a lovely one.
You like Lefroy?
My first whiskey I ever drank was a Lefroy. And
Do you
I
know my
tried-
first one was as well? I had a Lefroy 10 was my first whiskey, and after
Mine
that I was
too.
like, I hate whiskey.
and
If you're going in thinking this is going to be enjoyable, then
You
Lefroy
are
is
wrong.
going to be a problem.
Yeah.
It depends.
Although Deepa's a peat head. She's like, wow, this is fantastic.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
From the start, you like peated whiskey, probably peated.
Yeah.
For me, I was the other way around.
For me?
I love the.
Tried any older peated? I'm sure you.
Yeah,
have some
yeah.
somewhere.
I
Where it
tried
does
quite a
soften
few.
a little bit.
It does.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't get me wrong, I love Bowmore.
Yeah.
Bowmore,
Yeah, okay.
I really enjoy that. I really do find that for me, Ardbeg and Lefroy are just like you're drinking iodine and like.
Yeah.
Okay.
You say that as if it's bad.
Yeah.
You reinforce a theory that I already had about people that enjoy smoky whiskey. So the thing is, people will come to me and they'll say, Lefroy, tastes like wet dog, old socks.
No.
It tastes like a hospital burning down, and they're always the ones afterwards that go, but you know what? Lefroy is my favourite.
No problem. I recommend for you honeymoon on Aya.
Honeymoon
Honeymoon
on
on
Ice.
no.
Are you more of a sherry person in general with whiskey? I mean?
It really depends on the time of year.
Yeah.
So towards like the winter months, I'm really big on my sherry
Yeah.
whiskies. But during the summer, I like to switch it up a bit. During the summer, I actually sway more towards rum finishes.
Oh.
So like my
Yeah.
second favourite is the Balvenie 14, the
Right.
Caribbean cask, which I'm not supposed to tell people because we don't own that distillery.
Yeah.
But it's an incredible whiskey. It's so easy to drink.
Yeah.
But even the Chivas rum finish, I've got
Yeah.
a bottle of that sitting in the office waiting for me to buy because it is. They're something different. There's something summery about them. But I do like my bourbon casks as well. There's a different whiskey for every mood, honestly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, of course.
I wouldn't really say that I.
And some moods are good for either whiskies, right?
Especially-
Okay, sorry,
Poland.
we just left that behind. Okay,
I can honestly
Move
say
on.
Maybe
I have
the
never
sherry
ever
other ones.
sat down and gone, oh, do you know what? I'm in the mood for a whiskey.
For a
Toilet
Lefroy.
cleaner. Let's go for a
Yeah,
Lefroy.
Lefroy.
I really feel like chewing on a car tire
Oh,
today.
Yeah. One day you
No,
will.
then you have to
Just
try
remember.
magic.
But
Someone.
Yeah.
yeah,
This is really a car tire.
Yeah.
I get that an Oxmoor from the Brutality.
She's only 20. The day,
Yeah,
will,
Maybe
the day will
it
come.
changes.
The day
If we
will
come in 5 years sitting here and enjoy a Lefroy 10-year-old for lunch, so you changed.
Yeah, either that or it will be an Ardbeg. It'll just be something that you never saw coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're at 27. I'm so late with this tasting. I was supposed to finish this like half an hour
It's
ago. I
been-
hope
it's
you guys
been
will
great.
remember to be.
Really?
Oh, I see. We're going 8 years. Of course, with the spring.
27-year-old is really beautiful.
Yeah. So the 27 it mixes really well with it's so different from the other Strathisla whiskies So it's like a mix between a Longhorn and a Glenkeith. You get that citrus note, so there's orange zest in here, but from the Longhorn side of things, there's that really, really kind of vanilla custard creamy flavour with a lot of a dark chocolate tasting note, and they just mix together really well to give you like a chocolate orange tasting note. So it's just unbelievable, this one. It's so good.
But a bit of coffee too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going in that direction. Yeah,
So a bit dirty.
yeah, a little dirty.
A banana.
Oh, bananas.
No, I don't have bananas in there.
I've got more coffee than bananas.
It's towards the finish, it's more like coffee and leather, but it's not like when you smell the whiskey, it's not like the first thing you get is coffee. It's usually, for me, it's after you take it away, you start to have like, it's like that leftover kind of residual smell of coffee and leather. It reminds me of my granddad, to be honest, because he always smelled like Old Spice. Like, he had this old like crusty leather chair that was falling apart for like 50 years, and he always had a cup of coffee by his side. It was always filter coffee, never ever instant coffee. So you know, it's like just him, you know, pouring in a whiskey.
And also a bit of the texture of oily.
Oily white.
Yeah.
It's very dry too, I think. Yeah, for me it's very dry.
I mean, on the surface, I would say we definitely won't like this one compared to the others. But I'm surprised how much that I am enjoying it. Because we typically don't go for the nice show. We're not coffee drinkers.
It's got a very similar character to a Mortlach. Or a Benriach in how meaty it actually is.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's so.
Saying it's similar to a Mortlach.
It's so different to you know what you normally see from Strathisla whiskies.
Yes.
For me, the 16 and the 19 are pretty much bang on what you expect from Strathisla. Your orchard fruits are right there punching you in the face, and your 27 and your 27's got that Longhorn, that Glenkeith, that really smooth creaminess, and your 8-year-old's got that Mortlach Benriach meatiness.
Looks like we want to keep the bottle on.
So
That one's easy to understand. It's so dark.
that is the end of the tasting. So I'll take you guys back to the shop. It's been an absolute pleasure, honestly. One of the best tastings I've ever done. You guys are in Scotland. We say crack. These are great crack.
It's in Northern Ireland as well.
Yeah, these are really good conversation. So you can come back anytime you want.
Thank you. So which pleasure? So you have to pick one. Which one are you going for?
27.
27, yes, that's the correct answer. What about you guys?
Which one are you going for? You have to pick one bottle. We have to wait 5 minutes for this answer, by the way.
She's not so decided.
I'm fine. There's 27 now. It's fine. But for now,
we don't have to whisper with you because she can't hear.
but for now, I've just done this up now. So also up. To be the two, okay, so now after this 27.
I think she's going to come to the correct answer.
I think the 27 sounds.
Yeah.
Sounds like
27.
Sounds like that. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Everyone agrees.
27.
27.
All of us.
I love 27, so good.
Yeah.
Was that the last of it? Oh.
No more. I told you
That's
no more.
Hang on.
And my second was the nice one.
It's like 2 drops. Right, well, I will take you guys back to the shop before I get the sack.
Okay. Good tasting.
Okay.
Too expensive. That's coming from Deepa. That was fun.
She's very, very good. Give it
Carrots?
information from a person is brilliant.
It was actually quite nice just hearing more like of a what it's like as a person to live here.
Yeah.